Folks, thank you very much for coming out tonight. I'd like a great big round of applause for Ryan for setting this up. The man pulled $300 out of his own pocket for all of this. Of course, the World Freeman Society is going to be getting him back. So we are going to be, Static, the mic addict, is going to be walking around passing his hat. A loony or a toonie from you folks, dude, is going to make us be able to do this again next year even bigger. So I want to thank Ryan for setting this up. I'd also like to thank the corporation of the city of Kelowna for charging us $300 to use our own public parks. Thanks, guys. I'd also like to thank the RCMP officers I spoke with earlier for walking around and... Dude, don't fuck with a grown man wearing a cartoon shirt. I'd like to thank the RCMP officers for communicating with me and expressing to me just how completely ignorant they are of the criminal code. I'd like to thank them for commenting on my hat. Well, they were absent of a badge like they're supposed to have according to the Police Act. And I guarantee you, officer, if you can hear me, your boss is going to be hearing my comments about that. We live in a world, folks, where there is a very small group of people call themselves lawyers. They're a member of the law societies. These are the people who craft the words that these men with guns come and impose upon you. They call them your laws. If you ask them carefully, they will tell you you cannot understand these laws because they are not written in English, they're written in law. And you don't know what they mean. And yet, at the same time, the men with guns who call themselves peace officers have no problem breaching the peace in order to enforce these statutes, which apparently we are too much of a child to understand. This is the reality we live in. Now, I came to my knowledge because about 8 years ago, government agents came into my life and they committed absolute betrayal to me. I knew nothing more about the law than most of you now. Who here has a driver's license? Raise your hands. Okay, now who here actually read the Motor Vehicle Act before applying for their license? No one. You pay your income tax, but you don't read the Income Tax Act. You have a driver's license, but you never read the Motor Vehicle Act. And those people with guns would be very hard-pressed to prove to you that you have an obligation to ask them for permission to engage in a lawful action. Let me ask you this. Who asks for permission to engage in a lawful action? A child. Mommy, can I have a cookie? Yes, you can have a cookie. Mommy just takes the cookie. I am a man of words. I put those guys up because I could not follow them sons of bitches with the fucking internet. How do you follow that when you only got words? But I am a man of words. My very first word I spoke when I was 6 months old. It was anti-disestablishmentarianism. To be honest, it came out more like bliss. But the thought was there.
Oh, sorry.
Let me ask you this, folks. Knowing that you have never read the Motor Vehicle Act, the Income Tax Act, likely not the Criminal Code of Canada, and I, like a nut, spent about 7 years doing nothing but deconstructing that, let me ask you this question. If it was possible in Canada to achieve lawful excuse to disobey every court, every government, and every cop, provided you were not harming another human being, would you want to know how to do that? I'm here to tell you that is possible. I'm here to tell you I've done it. It is very easy to do. They are just human beings. They're only human beings and they're only using words. They are not magical creatures. There is no wizard. There is no spoon. If you read the Criminal Code of Canada, if you got a pen, write this down, folks, or Google, check out thinkfree.ca or the World Freeman Society. The Criminal Code of Canada, and before I go on, you're going to say that can't be true. I'm going to tell you a little story. There was a hunter in Nanaimo. He was out hunting for sustenance. A conservation officer came by, asked him for a license. He said, I don't have one. He said, I'm taking your gun. But he said, that's okay, I got 12 more at home. Conservation officer says, well, every time I see you, I'm going to take your firearm. But he said, that'll work until you get the last one, then you're only taking bullets, because I need this to live. Conservation officer didn't like that. He called the RCMP. They came back to his home the next day. He was growing pot. He had some firearms. He was facing 12 different charges. He called me up. I worked with him for about a week, set him up with what is called a notice of understanding and intent and a claim of right. There are examples on that table. He served it on him. 3 days later, he gets a phone call from the RCMP asking him to come in. He comes in and they have a little chat. They want him to sign an agreement. He called me, he said, should I sign this? I said, what does it say? He told me what it said. I said, yeah, sign that puppy. He got back all of his guns, all of his ammo, all of his grow-op, and he entered into an agreement that if he was out hunting and he saw a conservation officer, he simply wouldn't talk to him. We have the power to refuse intercourse with any peace officer, provided they haven't seen us breach the peace. You can ignore these people. You have no obligation to have name, identification, and if there is anyone here who can tell me, swear on the Bible, that they know when they were born, I will kiss your ass right here, because you weren't counting then. People have asked me, I've had cops ask me, what's your last name? I said, I don't have a last name, I have a family name. They said, well, what's your family name? I said, Menard. They said, what's your given names? I said, that depends on who gave them to me. For instance, you guys gave me the names That Fucking. And he went, you're That Fucking Menard. Yeah. Oh, Mr. Music Man is telling me about kids.
He was really good this time. He swears up a storm. Give him some credit.
Okay, sorry, buddy. If you're showing restraint, I'll try to. Bear in mind, I didn't mess up their set when they were on, did I? Folks, if you look at the Criminal Code of Canada, you'll find something very extraordinary. Section 38 and 39. And bear in mind, what these guys did to music, I did to the law. While they were sitting there jamming, I was under a bridge going, I'm going to figure this shit out. Section 38-39, it tells us that if you are holding property and you are holding it under a claim of right, you can use whatever level of force is required to protect that property, even against those who feel they have a legal right to it, like police officers. That claim of right is proven right there to be a lawful excuse to engage in an action which otherwise would land you in jail. Section 126 and 127. Read that and it will tell you that if you have a lawful excuse, you can disobey every court, every government, every order, every bylaw in the land. Now, this does not free you to anarchy. It doesn't mean you can go through life harming another human being. You're still bound by the law. You can't harm another human being. You can't damage property. You can't use fraud in your contracts. But what you can do is grow, smoke, and sell all the pot you want. You can exercise your common law right to travel. And the fact is, look at this. This is Canada. There are very few places in the world where I would get away with doing what I'm doing. Yeah! And yet, I still do. This is an awesome place, and we do have our remedy. And the reason we have our remedy, answer me this. Who can govern you without your consent?
Nobody!
Nobody. When you put your signature on documents with the words registration, application, submission. My first book actually was called Registration, Application, Submission, means drop them, bend over, and don't expect lube, how the government really gains power. I was angry and big on long descriptive titles. Folks, when you submit, you are agreeing to bend to the will of another. If you apply, the definition of the word apply means to beg, plead, petition, entreat, or implore. If you beg, the law assumes you know what you're begging for, you know what you're giving up for it, You're acknowledging that someone else has the power to give it to you, and you're doing it entirely voluntarily. Registration, if you registered your, what is that? A tent. If you registered your tent with me, just like other people register their houses, their cars, and their children, that tent would be mine, and you would need my permission to use it. That is what the act of registration is. And here they've got us submitting application for registration for everything from our children to our homes. Who here has a birth certificate on them? Okay, who here has a student loan? Who would like to learn how to force the government to discharge your student loan? Folks, Canada is a signatory to the United Nations Covenant where they acknowledge post-secondary education as a right. It's necessary for the development of a free and just society, and it would be made equally accessible to everyone, and in particular with the progressive introduction of free education. Now, you have a student loan, is that correct?
That is correct.
You get a letter from them, it says your loan on it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Let me ask you something. Who lent who what?
The government lent me money.
Wrong. Why do you think they call it your loan? It's either a noun or a verb. They're calling it yours. You did not walk in and get money and say thank you. You walked in and you gave them a piece of paper with your signature on it. That's the value. You lent them. You loaned them. That's why they call it your loan. Do you think these lawyers make mistakes like that when it comes to liability? Of course not. Folks, someone pull out their birth certificate. On the back of it, you'll see a number. Who's got it? It might be in green ink, and it might actually say revenue receipt, treasury use only. Is that what it says? Come on up here. Read what's on there, not the number though. Right in here.
Revenue receipt for treasury use only.
Just as said.
Now folks, who the hell received what revenue? Where the hell has it gone? Huh? You never asked that. This side of the document is actually far more important than this one. Canada operates as a corporation. Look around. We're the richest country on the planet. When you look at the amount of people that we have, the amount of resources, we're number one. Guess who owns all that? No, we do. But when you register your child, there are stocks in our corporation. They're called securities. You own the security. This is evidence that he owns his security. However, he's not holding his own security. He's letting the government do that. That's what the elections are about. Who are you going to let play with your cookie jar? They feed you oatmeal while they eat at your buffet. This evidence is right here that they always owe you money. Always. It's your company. It's your country. If you look at your act you applied under, did you read that act before you applied? No, you didn't. Come here, I get to fucking slap you. Pardon my language. Folks, that's how they get us. It's too difficult for us to read, and so they get away with it. If you read under that act, you will find that we have the power to discharge student loans by way of a set-off or a deduction. Either one means if the government owes you money, you get to tell them, take that money and pay off my student loan. And guess what? Revenue receipt. They always owe you money. We have free post-secondary education available to us, but if you don't actually avail yourself to it, you end up paying crushed under endless debt. This information, that number right there, is a security tracking number. He has access to revenue, which if he wanted to access it, he could use it to pay for anything recognized as a human right, because Canada is a signatory to a UN covenant. This includes housing. Recently, just last month, we had a guy discharge a $91,000 mortgage by pointing to that number. We discharged over $67 million worth of student loans in the very first year we uncovered this information. You can use it for health care. You can use it for travel. You can't use it to go to Vegas and hire hookers and play the tables. But you can use it for anything that is a benefit to you and your society simultaneously. And I don't know about you, but I think we'd be a far better place with less ignorance out there. You're supposed to clap longer so I can drink water. Folks, the reason they get away with all of this is because we let them. We all remember that Robert Drzezinski who was tasered to death by people who are supposed to be peace officers. We trust them to keep the peace, and they walked in saying we're going to commit an assault. But because they're the only peace officers out there, they get away with it. I don't know about you, but when I saw that, I felt ashamed. I felt this is on all of us. We can't just blame the cops. Because for the most part, and I've met a lot of police officers in what I do, many of them are very, very good people who are really trying to preserve and maintain the peace. But then they get involved, they want to be a peace officer and do that. Fine, you must also work for our corporation and you must enforce our policies and you can't understand them, so just go beat up everyone. You know what it's like? Have you ever been to a park where they have leash laws for your dog? So you put a leash on your dog and you let it run free and you don't hold the other end of that leash. They think they're peace officers, they can go out and bite anyone. The good thing though is that they aren't the only ones who can be peace officers. Under the Criminal Code of Canada, anyone here could be a peace officer. Next week, what we're planning on doing, I'm going to be hired as a peace officer to preserve and maintain the public peace. I'm also going to make oath to exercise all of my rights as a all of my rights as a free man on the land. If any cop tries to stop me from, say, smoking a joint, because I'm just exercising my rights as a free man, if they try to stop me, they are now obstructing a peace officer in the performance of his duties. We have the power to do that. The only reason they get away with what they do is because we act like kids. We don't demonstrate the required amount of reasonable activity, prudence, and courtesy. If we can just act a little bit more maturely, all of their rules have no power over us because we've grown up and we don't need Nanny to change our diapers or feed us anymore because we know life is a buffet and I'm not shitting on it. So the process for becoming we're going to call it the Canadian Common Corps of Peace Officers, or C3PO. It's not going to be a militia because we're not going to be armed with anything except our courage, our video cameras, and our cell phones. And we will record these peace officers as they do their duties. And if they walk down the street without a badge and we get that on tape, we bring charges to them. Now the fact is, who here has ever been in a court? Do you believe that these courts belong to you? They don't. They are private enterprises operated as corporations by the law societies. They are not your courts. You don't actually have access to true courts, courts de jure, wherein you can be equal with a lawyer. In the existing courts, sorry pal, these courts don't belong to you. It's like your neighbor has a pool, he lets you swim in it, but he gets to decide how much chlorine goes in it and when it's open. The next thing that we're going to be doing, the World Freeman Society, and dudes, we're all over the place, eh? This was just whispers on the wind 9 months ago, and now we are New Zealand, Australia, England, Ireland, Scotland, Denmark, Spain, Canada, all over the place. The World Freeman Society, dude, you watch, a year from now, we're going to have our own courts. And these judges who are out there dragging us in using coercion in order to essentially govern us absent consent and with a threat of force, we get to put them in jail for 14 years if they keep it up. The problem with that, of course, is that doesn't bring you a remedy. All it does is bring you more violence and conflict. In order for us to really reach our full potential, we're going to have to learn how to forgive these people and realize that their deception rested entirely on our own ignorance. And we could deal with that. If you want power in your future, you have to accept responsibility for the past. And nobody wants to accept that they were stupid enough to be deceived by all these lawyers and judges. But if you do, and you accept it, and you write a little letter to them saying, you know what, I don't like what you've been doing, so I quit. I'm not playing anymore. I don't consent. You serve them off this notice, and they have no power under the law to come and impose their will upon you, provided no one is pointing at you and saying, that man harmed me, that man damaged my property, that man used fraud in his contract. Everything they do, the Income Tax Act, Motor Vehicle Act, all of these things are the rules that Nanny puts down on the people that her charges. Nanny's your babysitter. Who here has a social insurance number? Who wants to be sin-free? Folks, your social insurance number, if you look at it, this is another big trick. Now imagine for a moment, we're a house, we're Canada, we hire our servants. They're supposed to be our servants. And then they trick us into applying under them for a social insurance number. That social insurance number, where do you get it? Human Resources Canada. Remember, the country, the government operates as a corporation. Human Resources means you're an employee. If you go to Revenue, if you go to Human Resources Canada, ask them for your federal employee identification number, they will tell you, oh, that's your social insurance number. You need it to collect Canada pension. The courts have ruled that right there, only employees pay into a pension plan. You are an employee of the federal government by virtue of your social insurance number. And it is the rules that they enforce on you, the Controlled Drug Substance Act, that is applicable to the employees of the corporation. If you quit and say, I'm no longer your employee, their rules, how can they apply them to you? When they tell you that you need that number to work legally in Canada, they are not referring to the geographical area. They are referring to a legal entity that has a very similar sounding name. So, what I would ask that y'all do, because I'm pretty sure my time is waning here, check out thinkfree.ca and the World Freeman Society. We've got examples of notices and understanding and intent. Now, when the first people started doing this, they spent thousands and thousands of hours studying it. You do not have to do that. We've done a lot of the work for you. Ninja catch. See that, eh? We've done a lot of the work for you, so you can get there yourself very easily. And as I go, because I did promise someone a little bit of comedy, and this is all about words, right? And the other day, you know what it's all about? It's about words, and it's about our kids. All we really want is a safe place to raise our kids and see them reach their full potential. But there's no way that's happening when the people in government just keep creating more and more and more rules that we apparently can't even understand. Look at the trend, dude. These kids are going to be slaves if we don't do something about it.